A homeless woman was arrested for sleeping in a subway station. Then a Navy Admiral whispered 2 words that changed everything. For 3 years, she had been invisible. Then, in one moment, she became the most important person in the room. Sarah Mitchell sat on the cold concrete floor of the downtown police precinct, her wrists still red from the handcuffs. She was 34 years old, but she looked 50. Her brown hair was matted and pulled back with a rubber band. Her jacket, once blue, was now a faded gray stained with dirt and time. Her sneakers had holes in them, and her jeans were held together with safety pins. She wasn't angry, she wasn't scared, she was just tired. The officer at the desk, Officer Ramirez, barely looked at her. He was typing on his computer, filling out the trespassing report. It was the 3rd time this month she'd been brought in. Same charge, same station, same outcome. A night in holding, a court date she wouldn't make, and then back to the streets. Mitchell, Sarah J., he said aloud as he typed. Date of birth, April 12, 1990, no fixed address. No fixed address. That was the polite way of saying homeless. Sarah didn't respond, she just stared at the floor. The fluorescent lights hummed above her. The station smelled like burnt coffee, sweat, and the faint chemical tang of cleaning solution. It was 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. The station was quiet, except for the occasional radio chatter and the sound of keyboards clicking. You know the drill, Mitchell, Ramirez said, not unkindly. We'll process you. You'll spend the night in holding. Judge will see you tomorrow afternoon. Probably time served and released. Sarah nodded. She knew the drill. Why do you keep going back to that station? Ramirez asked, his voice softer now. There are shelters, there are programs. Sarah looked up at him. Her eyes were a pale gray like storm clouds. They were tired eyes, but they weren't empty. There was something still alive in them, something that hadn't given up entirely. The shelters are full, she said quietly. And the programs have waiting lists. The subway station is warm, it's safe, I don't bother anyone. Ramirez sighed. He'd heard it all before. He went back to typing. What he didn't know, what no one in that station knew, was that Sarah Mitchell had not always been homeless. 3 years ago, she had been someone else entirely. She had been Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell, a Navy intelligence officer with a top-secret clearance and a career that was supposed to change the world. But that was before the mission, before the fire, before everything fell apart. 3 years earlier, Sarah had been stationed at Naval Intelligence Command in San Diego. She was one of the best cryptanalysts in her unit, a specialist in signals intelligence. She could break codes that others couldn't even see. She could find patterns in chaos. It was a gift, and the Navy knew it. Her commanding officer, Captain Dale Brennan, had handpicked her for a special operation. It was classified at the highest level. The mission was called Operation Crimson Dawn, and only 12 people in the entire military knew it existed. The objective was simple but critical: intercept and decode enemy communications from a hostile foreign power that was developing a new class of cyber weapons. These weren't ordinary hackers. This was a state-sponsored operation that could cripple U.S. infrastructure, power grids, financial systems, everything. Sarah's job was to break their encryption. She worked 16-hour days for 6 months. She lived in a secure facility. She didn't see her family. She didn't have friends outside the team. She just worked. And she succeeded. She cracked the code. She intercepted the communications. She identified the key players, the target list, the timeline. Operation Crimson Dawn was hailed as one of the most successful intelligence operations in a decade. But then everything went wrong. The intelligence was leaked. Someone on the team, someone with access, sold the information to the very people they were trying to stop. The enemy knew they'd been compromised. They accelerated their plans. They launched a coordinated attack on 3 U.S. power grids, causing blackouts across the eastern seaboard. Millions of people were affected. Critical systems went offline. Hospitals lost power. People died. The Navy launched an investigation. They called it a witch hunt. They interrogated everyone on the team. They pulled security clearances. They destroyed careers. And Sarah, who had done nothing wrong, was blamed. Not officially. No charges were ever filed. But the whisper started. Sarah Mitchell was the leak. Sarah Mitchell was the one who sold them out. Sarah Mitchell was a traitor. It didn't matter that there was no evidence. It didn't matter that she'd passed every polygraph, every background check, every interview. The stain was there, and it wouldn't wash off. Her commanding officer, Captain Brennan, tried to protect her. He fought for her. He went to bat for her at every level. But the pressure was too much. The Navy needed a scapegoat, and Sarah was convenient. She was quietly reassigned. Her clearance was suspended, pending review. Her career, which had been on a fast track to commander and beyond, came to a screeching halt, and then came the fire. 6 months after the operation, Sarah was living in a small apartment off base. She was still technically in the Navy, but she had no duties, no assignments. She was in limbo. One night, there was an electrical fire in her building. It started in the unit below hers. By the time the alarms went off, the smoke was already thick. Sarah made it out. Barely. But everything she owned burned. Her uniforms, her medals, her records, her identity, everything. The fire was ruled an accident, but Sarah never believed it. She believed it was a message, a warning to stay quiet. 3 months later, she was medically discharged from the Navy. The official reason was PTSD from the fire. The real reason was that they wanted her gone. She tried to rebuild. She applied for jobs. She used her skills, her experience, her training. But every background check came back with red flags. Every interview ended the same way. "We'll be in touch." They never were. Her savings ran out. Her unemployment ran out. She couldn't afford rent. She moved into her car. Then her car was repossessed. And just like that, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell became Sarah Mitchell, homeless woman. Back in the precinct, Officer Ramirez finished typing. He stood up and walked over to where Sarah sat. "All right, Mitchell, let's get you processed." He helped her to her feet. She stood slowly, her joints stiff from sitting on the cold floor. He led her down a narrow hallway to the holding cells. The walls were painted a pale, sickly green. The floor was scuffed linoleum. The air smelled like disinfectant and despair. They passed 2 other cells. One held a man who was sleeping, snoring loudly. The other held a young woman who was crying quietly, her mascara streaked down her face. Ramirez opened the 3rd cell. It was small, maybe 8 feet by 6 feet. There was a metal bench bolted to the wall and a toilet in the corner. That was it. "Sorry it's not the Ritz," Ramirez said, trying for humor. Sarah didn't smile. She stepped inside. The door clanged shut behind her, the lock clicking into place with a heavy, final sound. She sat down on the bench. It was cold and hard. She pulled her jacket tighter around herself and closed her eyes. She had learned over the past 3 years how to sleep anywhere, on sidewalks, in doorways, on subway benches. The trick was to not think, to shut off your brain, to just exist. But tonight she couldn't do it. Tonight something felt different. She opened her eyes and stared at the ceiling. A single fluorescent bulb flickered overhead, buzzing like an angry wasp. She thought about the subway station. She thought about the security guard who had found her, the one who had called the police. He'd been apologetic. "I'm sorry, ma'am, I don't make the rules. I have to call it in." She thought about Officer Ramirez, who was just doing his job. She thought about the judge she'd see tomorrow, who would look at her with pity or contempt or both. And she thought about Captain Brennan. She wondered if he was still in the Navy. She wondered if he ever thought about her. She wondered if he knew what had happened to her. Probably not. People moved on. The Navy moved on. The world moved on. Only Sarah was stuck, frozen in time, living the same terrible day over and over again. She closed her eyes again. Hours passed. The station grew quieter. The night shift settled into its routine. Sarah dozed, her head resting against the cold cinder block wall, and then at 5:47 a.m., everything changed. The front doors of the precinct burst open. The sound was so loud, so sudden, that Officer Ramirez jumped in his chair, spilling his coffee. 4 men entered. They moved with precision, with purpose. They were all in uniform, Navy uniforms, dress blues, perfectly pressed, shoes shined to a mirror finish. The man in the lead was tall, broad-shouldered, with silver hair cut military short. His chest was covered in ribbons. On each shoulder he wore 3 stars, a vice admiral. Behind him, 3 other officers followed. 2 were captains, 1 was a commander. Their expressions were serious, almost grim. The precinct fell silent. The dispatcher stopped talking mid-sentence. The officers at their desks froze. Even the man in the holding cell stopped snoring. Ramirez stood up slowly, his hand instinctively going to his belt, to his radio. "Can I help you?" The Vice Admiral stepped forward. His name tag read Harkness. His voice was deep, clear, and carried the unmistakable tone of command. "I am Vice Admiral Marcus Harkness, United States Navy. I am here for one of your detainees." Ramirez blinked. "Sir, I'm not sure I understand. Which detainee?" "Sarah Mitchell." The name hung in the air like a grenade. Ramirez looked confused. "Mitchell? The homeless woman? She's just in for trespassing. We're processing her for court today." "You will release her immediately," Admiral Harkness said. "It was not a request." "Sir, with respect, I can't just release a detainee because—" "Officer?" One of the captains stepped forward. His name tag read Sullivan. He was holding a leather folder. He opened it and placed a document on the desk. "This is a federal detainer release order, signed by the Secretary of the Navy and countersigned by the Department of Justice. Sarah Mitchell is to be released into our custody immediately. No charges are to be filed. All records of this arrest are to be sealed." Ramirez picked up the document. His hands were shaking slightly. He read it twice. It was real. The seals were real. The signatures were real. I don't understand," he stammered. She's homeless. She's been arrested 3 times this month. Why would the Secretary of the Navy—" "That is not your concern, officer," Admiral Harkness said, his voice softening just a fraction. "You have done your duty. Now we need to do ours. Please bring her out." Ramirez nodded. He didn't understand, but he knew when he was outranked. He grabbed the keys from the hook on the wall and walked quickly down the hallway to the holding cells. He stopped in front of Sarah's cell. She was awake, sitting on the bench, staring at nothing. She looked up when she heard the keys jangle. "Mitchell," Ramirez said, his voice uncertain, You're being released." Sarah blinked. "What?" "You're being released, right now. There are some Navy officers here for you." Sarah's face went pale. Her heart, which had been beating slow and steady, suddenly kicked into overdrive. Navy officers. Here. For her. Her first thought was panic. "They found me. They're going to arrest me for real this time. They're going to charge me." Her second thought was confusion. Why would they come here? Why now? She stood up slowly. Her legs felt weak. Ramirez unlocked the cell and stepped back. "Come on, they're waiting." Sarah walked out of the cell. She followed Ramirez down the hallway, her mind racing. She tried to prepare herself for whatever was about to happen: interrogation, charges, prison. But when she stepped into the main room of the precinct and saw the men waiting for her, she froze. Vice Admiral Marcus Harkness. She recognized him immediately. He had been a captain when she was in the Navy, but she'd never met him. He was a legend. He was the Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence. He was one of the most powerful men in the military, and he was here for her. Admiral Harkness looked at her. His expression was unreadable. He studied her for a long moment, taking in her appearance. The dirty clothes, the matted hair, the hollow cheeks. Then he stepped forward. He stopped 2 feet in front of her. The precinct was silent. Everyone was watching. Admiral Harkness looked into Sarah's eyes. And then, in a voice that was quiet but clear, he said 2 words. "Crimson One." Sarah's world tilted. Crimson One. That was her call sign, her operational call sign during Operation Crimson Dawn. Only 12 people in the world knew that name. It was classified. It was buried. It was dead. But Admiral Harkness had just said it out loud. Sarah's knees buckled. She grabbed the edge of the desk to steady herself. "How do you—" she whispered. "How do you know that name?" Admiral Harkness didn't answer the question. Instead, he said, "Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell, we need your help." Sarah shook her head. I'm not a lieutenant commander anymore. I was discharged. You were never discharged," Admiral Harkness said firmly. "You were placed on inactive status pending review. That review was completed 6 months ago. You were cleared of all suspicion. Your record was expunged. Your rank was reinstated." Sarah stared at him. "What?" "You were set up, Commander," Captain Sullivan said, stepping forward. "We know that now. We found the real leak. We found the traitor. It wasn't you. It was never you." Sarah's vision blurred. She wasn't sure if she was going to cry or faint or both. Then why didn't anyone tell me? Why didn't anyone find me? I've been living on the streets for 3 years. Admiral Harkness's jaw tightened. For the first time, his expression softened, and something that looked like guilt flickered across his face. We didn't know where you were, he said quietly. After you were discharged, you disappeared. No forwarding address, no phone, no contact. We've been looking for you for 6 months, Commander. We finally found you tonight because of this arrest. Sarah felt the weight of 3 years crash down on her all at once. The cold nights, the hunger, the fear, the shame. And it had all been for nothing. She had been cleared. She had been innocent. She had been abandoned. Why? She asked, her voice breaking. Why do you need me now? Admiral Harkness exchanged a glance with Captain Sullivan. Then he looked back at Sarah. Because the people you were tracking 3 years ago, the ones behind Operation Crimson Dawn, they're back, and they're planning something bigger, something catastrophic. We've intercepted fragments of their communications, but we can't break the encryption. No one can. He paused. Except you. Sarah shook her head. I can't. I don't have access to the systems. I don't have clearance. You have everything, Admiral Harkness interrupted. Your clearance has been reinstated. Your access has been restored. And as of right now, you are being recalled to active duty under emergency orders. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small blue folder. He handed it to her. Sarah opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a military ID card, her picture from 3 years ago, her name, her rank, Lieutenant Commander, and a clearance level, TSSCI, top secret, sensitive compartmented information. It was real. We have a car waiting outside, Admiral Harkness said. We need you to come with us, right now. There's a plane fueled and ready at the airfield. We'll brief you on the way. Sarah looked at the ID card. She looked at the Admiral. She looked at the officers standing behind him. And then she looked at Officer Ramirez, who was standing off to the side, his mouth hanging open. She started, but her voice failed. Admiral Harkness stepped closer. His voice was gentle now, almost fatherly. Commander, I know you've been through hell. I know you have every reason to say no, but we need you. Your country needs you, and I promise you we will make this right, all of it. Sarah looked down at the ID card again. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell. She had spent 3 years believing she was nothing, believing she was invisible, believing the world had forgotten her. But the world hadn't forgotten. The Navy hadn't forgotten. They had been looking for her. She closed the folder and looked up at Admiral Harkness. What's the mission? She asked, her voice steady for the first time in years. Admiral Harkness allowed himself a small, grim smile. Save the country, Commander, just like you did before. The black SUV moved through the empty pre-dawn streets of the city. Sarah sat in the back seat, flanked by Captain Sullivan on one side and Admiral Harkness on the other. The third officer, Commander Price, sat in the front passenger seat. The driver was a young Navy enlisted man who hadn't said a word. Sarah stared out the window. The city was still asleep. A few streetlights flickered. A homeless man, someone she might have known, pushed a shopping cart down the sidewalk. She watched him until he disappeared from view. How did you find me? Sarah asked quietly. Captain Sullivan answered. We've been monitoring arrest records in major cities for the past 6 months. When your name popped up tonight, we got an alert. We were on a plane within an hour. You've been monitoring arrest record, Sarah repeated, for me. For you, Sullivan confirmed. After we cleared you and reinstated your status, we realized no one knew where you were. We checked your last known address. It had burned down. We checked with family. You don't have any listed. We checked shelters, hospitals, VA facilities. Nothing. You vanished. I didn't vanish, Sarah said, her voice flat. I was right here. I was just invisible. Admiral Harkness turned to look at her. Commander, I want you to know that what happened to you, the way you were treated, it was a failure of the system, a failure of leadership, my failure. Sarah looked at him, surprised. I was the deputy director when Operation Crimson Dawn went sideways, Harkness continued. I should have protected you. I should have fought harder. I didn't. And for that, I owe you an apology. Sarah didn't know what to say. Apologies didn't change the past. They didn't give her back 3 years of her life, but they were something. Why now? She asked. You said they're back. The enemy. What happened? Harkness nodded to Captain Sullivan, who opened a tablet and handed it to Sarah. 2 weeks ago, Sullivan said, we intercepted a data burst from an unknown source. It was encrypted using a variation of the same cipher you broke during Crimson Dawn. We've thrown everything at it. NSA, CIA, our best cryptanalysts. No one can crack it. Sarah looked at the screen. Rows of numbers and symbols scrolled past. To anyone else, it would look like gibberish. But Sarah saw the patterns. She saw the structure. It's a polyalphabetic substitution, she murmured, her fingers moving across the screen, zooming in. But they've layered it, 3 levels deep, and they've added a time-based rotational key. Sullivan and Harkness exchanged a glance. Can you break it? Harkness asked. Sarah didn't answer right away. She studied the code. Her mind, which had been dormant for so long, sluggish from cold and hunger and despair, suddenly roared to life. It was like a muscle memory. The patterns clicked into place. Yes, she said finally, but I'll need access to the full data set. I'll need processing power, and I'll need time. You'll have all 3, Harkness said. We're taking you to a secure facility. It's off the books. No one outside of a handful of people knows it exists. You'll have everything you need. What's the threat? Sarah asked, still staring at the code. What are they planning? Harkness hesitated. Then he said, we don't know for certain, but the fragments we have suggest they're targeting critical infrastructure again. This time, not just power grids, water treatment plants, communication networks, transportation systems. If they succeed, it won't just be blackouts. It will be a total collapse. Millions of people will be at risk. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. When? We think within the next 72 hours. Sarah looked up from the tablet. 72 hours? That's not a lot of time, Harkness finished, which is why we need you. The SUV turned onto a highway heading out of the city. The sky was beginning to lighten, a faint, gray glow on the horizon. Sarah leaned back in her seat. She was exhausted. Her body ached. Her mind was spinning. 3 days ago, she had been sleeping in a subway station, invisible to the world. Now she was sitting in a government vehicle on her way to a secret facility tasked with preventing a national catastrophe. It felt surreal. Commander, Harkness said, pulling her from her thoughts, I need to know. Are you up for this? I know what you've been through. I know you're not at your best. If you need time... I don't need time, Sarah interrupted. Her voice was firm. I need a shower, a meal, and a workstation. Then I need the full data set. I'll break the code. Harkness studied her for a moment, then he nodded. All right then, let's get to work. The facility was located in the mountains, 2 hours north of the city. It was hidden behind layers of security, gates, checkpoints, biometric scanners. The building itself was nondescript, a low, concrete structure that looked like an old warehouse. But underground, it was a different story. The elevator descended 3 levels. The doors opened into a bright, modern space that looked more like a tech startup than a military installation. There were rows of computers, large monitors on the walls displaying maps and data streams, and a handful of people in civilian clothes working at various stations. Admiral Harkness led Sarah through the main room to a smaller side office. It was simple but clean: a desk, a computer, a couch, and a small bathroom with a shower. This is your space, Harkness said. There are clothes in the closet, all your size, toiletries in the bathroom. The kitchen is down the hall, fully stocked. Anything you need, just ask. Sarah looked around. It was more than she'd had in 3 years. Thank you, she said quietly. Harkness nodded. Get cleaned up, get some food, then we'll get you started. He turned to leave, but Sarah stopped him. Admiral? He turned back. Who was it? She asked. Who was the leak? Who set me up? Harkness's expression darkened. Captain Dale Brennan. Sarah felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. What? Your commanding officer, Harkness said. The one who said he was fighting for you. He was the traitor. He'd been feeding information to the enemy for 2 years. When the operation went bad, he needed someone to take the fall. He chose you. Sarah sat down heavily on the couch. Captain Brennan, the man who had mentored her, the man she had trusted. Where is he now? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Federal prison, Harkness said. He was arrested 6 months ago. He'll spend the rest of his life there. Sarah nodded slowly. It didn't make her feel better. It didn't undo the damage, but it was something. I'll leave you to it, Harkness said. He walked to the door, then paused. Commander, for what it's worth, you were right about everything. The code, the threat, the targets. You are the best analyst I've ever seen. You still are. He left, closing the door behind him. Sarah sat alone in the small office. For the first time in 3 years, she was warm, she was safe, she was clean, and she had a mission. She stood up and walked into the bathroom. She turned on the shower, letting the water heat up. Steam filled the small space. She peeled off her dirty clothes, the layers she'd worn for weeks, and stepped into the hot water. It felt like being born again. 2 hours later, Sarah Mitchell sat at the computer workstation, her hair still damp, wearing clean Navy fatigues that fit her perfectly. She had eaten scrambled eggs, toast, and coffee, real coffee, not the burnt sludge from the shelter, and her mind was sharper than it had been in years. On the monitor in front of her was the encrypted data burst, rows and rows of seemingly random characters. To most people, it would look impossible. To Sarah, it was a puzzle, and she loved puzzles. Captain Sullivan sat at a workstation nearby, monitoring the system. Admiral Harkness stood behind Sarah, watching over her shoulder. Talk me through it, Harkness said. Sarah's fingers moved across the keyboard, pulling up different analysis tools. Okay, she said. This is a polyalphabetic cipher, meaning each letter can be represented by multiple different characters. That makes it hard to break with standard frequency analysis, but they've added layers. The first layer is a Caesar shift, basic but effective. The second layer is a visionaire cipher, which uses a keyword to encode the message. And the third layer is where it gets interesting. What's the third layer? Sullivan asked. A time-based rotational key, Sarah said. The encryption changes every few hours based on the timestamp. So even if you crack the first 2 layers, the third one locks you out unless you know the exact time the message was sent. Harkness frowned. Can you get the timestamp? Already have it, Sarah said, pulling up a second window. It's embedded in the metadata. The message was sent at 03:47 GMT 2 weeks ago. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. She pulled up a decryption algorithm she had written years ago during Operation Crimson Dawn. She had modified it, adapted it, made it faster. The computer hummed, processing. How long? Harkness asked. Give me 30 minutes, Sarah said. She worked in silence. The room was quiet except for the clicking of keys and the low hum of the servers. Sarah's eyes never left the screen. She was in her element now. This was what she was good at. This was who she was. 28 minutes later, the computer beeped. Got it, Sarah said, the screen filled with text. Not random characters, actual words, actual sentences. Captain Sullivan leaned forward. What does it say? Sarah read aloud, her voice steady but grim. Phase 1 complete. Asset placement confirmed. Infrastructure access secured. Phase 2 initiates 0600 hours, day 0. Target priority, water treatment facilities, eastern seaboard. Secondary targets, communication hubs, transportation networks, authorization, Crimson Dawn. Admiral Harkness's face went pale. They're using the same operation name, they're taunting us. Sarah scrolled down. There was more. Final countdown, 68 hours from timestamp. Sullivan did the math quickly. That was 2 weeks ago. 68 hours from then is 14 days, Sarah finished, which means Harkness checked his watch. Day 0 is tomorrow, 0600 hours, 6 in the morning. The room fell silent. We have less than 24 hours, Sullivan said. Sarah kept reading. Her eyes scanned the text, looking for details, for clues. And then she saw it. Wait, she said, her voice sharp. There's more. There's a list. Asset names, locations. She pulled up the list. There were 12 names, 12 people, 12 traders embedded in critical infrastructure positions across the country. These are the people they've planted, Sarah said. They're the ones who are going to execute the attack. Harkness leaned over her shoulder, reading the names. His jaw tightened. We need to alert the FBI, Homeland Security, local law enforcement. We need to pick these people up now. Wait, Sarah said, holding up a hand. If we move too fast, we'll tip them off. They'll activate a contingency. We need to be smart about this. We don't have time to be smart, Harkness said. We have less than a day. Then we need to work fast, Sarah said. She turned to face him. Admiral, I need a team. I need analysts, field operatives, and I need direct access to every federal database we have. If we're going to stop this, we need to move like lightning. Harkness looked at her. The exhausted, broken woman he had pulled from a jail cell was gone. In her place was a lieutenant commander, sharp and focused. He nodded. You have it, all of it, whatever you need. Sarah turned back to the computer. Then let's get to work. And for the first time in 3 years, Sarah Mitchell felt like herself again. The operations room was alive with controlled chaos. 12 workstations had been set up in a semicircle, each manned by a specialist. Computer analysts, field coordinators, intelligence officers. Admiral Harkness had pulled them from different agencies: NSA, FBI, Homeland Security, Naval Intelligence. They had all been read into the operation within the last 3 hours. Sarah stood at the center of it all, in front of a massive digital screen that displayed a map of the United States. 12 red dots pulsed on the screen, marking the locations of the 12 traitors identified in the encrypted message. Captain Sullivan stood beside her, coordinating with field teams. Commander Price was on a secure line with the FBI. Admiral Harkness was pacing. Behind them, his hands clasped behind his back. All right, Sarah said, her voice cutting through the noise. Listen up. We have 22 hours until day 0. 12 targets. We cannot afford to spook them. If even one of them realizes we're onto them, they will activate their contingency plan. We'll lose everything, she pointed to the screen. These are not random placements. These people have been carefully positioned. 3 are in water treatment facilities in New York, Philadelphia, and Boston. 2 are in communication hubs in Washington, D.C. and Atlanta. 4 are in transportation control centers, 2 in airports, 1 in a rail system, 1 in a port authority, and the remaining 3 are in financial data centers. If they execute simultaneously, Sullivan added, we're looking at contaminated water supplies, communication blackouts, transportation shutdowns, and financial chaos. Millions of people affected, thousands could die. One of the analysts, a young woman named Agent Torres from Homeland Security, raised her hand. Commander, how do we know these are the right people? What if the names are decoys? It was a good question. Sarah had thought of it too. We cross-reference, Sarah said. She pulled up a new screen. Every name on this list has been vetted. I've spent the last 3 hours digging into their backgrounds. And here's what I found. They're all clean. Too clean. She pulled up the first profile. David Reese, Senior Systems Administrator at the Philadelphia Water Department. Hired 2 years ago. Excellent references. Perfect performance reviews. No red flags. She pulled up another. Jennifer Howe, Communication Specialist at the FAA Control Center in Atlanta. Hired 18 months ago. Also perfect. They're ghosts, Commander Price said, catching on. Deep cover operatives. Exactly, Sarah confirmed. Their backgrounds are real, but they've been scrubbed. No social media presence before their hiring dates, no digital footprint, no life. They were created for this operation. Admiral Harkness stepped forward. So how do we take them down without tipping off the others? Sarah turned to face him. We don't take them down, not yet. We watch them, we track them. And at exactly 0500 hours tomorrow morning, 1 hour before day 0, we move simultaneously. All 12 targets, all at once. No warning, no escape. That's risky, Sullivan said. If even one gets a message out, then we jam the communications, Sarah interrupted. We shut down their network. I've identified the communication protocol they're using. It's a peer-to-peer encrypted system. If we take down the central relay node, they can't talk to each other. Torres leaned forward. Where's the central node? Sarah pointed to the screen. A 13th dot appeared, this one in yellow. Here, an apartment building in Baltimore. The node is disguised as a wireless router in Unit 4B. I traced the signal pattern through the metadata in the original message. Admiral Harkness smiled grimly. Commander, you've been back for 6 hours and you've already done what 3 agencies couldn't do in 2 weeks. Sarah didn't smile. We're not done yet, sir. We still have to execute. Harkness nodded. All right, Captain Sullivan, coordinate with the field teams. I want eyes on all 12 targets within the next 2 hours. Commander Price, work with the FBI on the tactical teams. I want everyone in position by midnight. And the relay node? Torres asked. That's mine, Sarah said. I'm going to Baltimore. Harkness frowned. Commander, you're an analyst, not a field operative. I'm also the only person who knows what to look for, Sarah countered. The node is sophisticated. It's not just a router. It's got fail-safes, encryption, probably a dead man's switch. If a tactical team goes in blind, they'll trigger it. I need to be there. Harkness studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Fine, but you're not going alone. Captain Sullivan goes with you, and you take a full tactical team. Sarah agreed. We leave in 1 hour. The drive to Baltimore took 2 hours. Sarah rode in the back of an armored SUV with Captain Sullivan and 4 members of a Navy SEAL team. They didn't speak much. Sarah spent the time reviewing the technical specifications of the relay node, memorizing the layout of the apartment building, planning the approach. Sullivan watched her work. How are you holding up? He asked quietly. Sarah looked up from her tablet. I'm fine. You were sleeping in a subway station 18 hours ago. And now I'm saving the country, Sarah said. Life's funny that way. Sullivan smiled. You know, when we got the alert about your arrest, Harkness didn't hesitate. He said, That's her, that's our analyst. Get her now. He's believed in you this whole time. Sarah didn't respond right away. She looked out the window at the dark highway. He should have believed in me 3 years ago. He did, Sullivan said, but he was overruled. The brass wanted blood. They wanted someone to blame. Harkness fought for you as long as he could. When he couldn't protect you anymore, he started working to clear your name. It took him 2.5 years, but he did it. Sarah felt a lump in her throat. Why are you telling me this? Because you should know, Sullivan said. You're not alone. You weren't alone. We just didn't find you fast enough. Sarah nodded. She didn't trust herself to speak. The SUV pulled into a parking lot 3 blocks from the target building. The team got out, moving silently. They were dressed in civilian clothes, but Sarah could see the outlines of body armor beneath their jackets. The building was a 4-story walk-up, old brick, unremarkable. The kind of place no one would look twice at, perfect for hiding a communication node. Sarah and Sullivan approached first, accompanied by 2 of the SEALs. The other 2 stayed with the vehicle, monitoring communications. They entered the building. The lobby was empty, just a row of dented mailboxes and a stairwell that smelled like mildew and old carpet. Unit 4B is on the 4th floor, Sarah whispered, north side. They climbed the stairs slowly, their footsteps muffled. Sarah's heart was pounding. She hadn't been in the field in years. She'd forgotten how real it felt, how every sound seemed amplified, every shadow a threat. They reached the 4th floor. The hallway was narrow, dim, lit by a single flickering bulb. Unit 4B was at the end. One of the SEALs, a man named Petty Officer Graves, moved ahead. He knelt by the door, pulling out a small device. Checking for electronic locks, he whispered. He scanned the door. Clear, standard deadbolt, no alarms. Sarah frowned. That's wrong. There should be security. Maybe they didn't think anyone would find it, Sullivan suggested. Or maybe it's a trap, Sarah said. Graves looked at her. Orders? Sarah thought fast. Can you get a camera under the door? Graves nodded. He pulled out a fiber optic camera, thin as a thread. He slid it under the door and handed the monitor to Sarah. The screen showed the interior of the apartment. It was almost empty, no furniture, just a small folding table in the center of the room, and on the table a black box about the size of a shoebox. Wires ran from it to a small antenna mounted on the window. That's it, Sarah said, and that's the relay node. Any booby traps? Sullivan asked. Sarah studied the screen. I don't see any, but that doesn't mean they're not there. She made a decision. Graves, can you pick the lock? In my sleep, ma'am. Do it, slow and quiet. Graves went to work. The lock clicked open in less than 30 seconds. He pushed the door open an inch, then stopped. Everyone held their breath. Nothing. Graves pushed the door open wider. Still nothing. Sarah stepped forward. I'm going in. Commander, Sullivan started. "It's my call," Sarah said. She stepped through the door. The apartment was cold and silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the relay node. Sarah approached the table slowly, her eyes scanning every surface, every corner. She knelt beside the node. It was more complex than she'd expected. The black box had 3 layers: the outer casing, a secondary containment shell, and the internal circuitry. There were also 2 small blinking LEDs, one green, one red. "Talk to me, Commander," Sullivan said from the doorway. "It's active," Sarah said. "The green light means it's transmitting. The red light is a failsafe. If I disconnect it wrong, it sends an alert to all 12 operatives." "Can you disable it?" Sarah studied the wiring. "Yes, but I need time." "How much time?" 10 minutes, maybe 15. Sullivan checked his watch. "We have 20 hours until day 0, but if they're monitoring this thing and they see it go offline, then they'll know we're onto them," Sarah finished, "which is why I'm not going to shut it down. I'm going to hijack it." Sullivan blinked. "You're going to what?" Sarah smiled for the first time in hours. "I'm going to take control of their communication network. If I can reroute the signal through our servers, we'll be able to monitor everything they send. We'll know if they try to activate early. We'll know if they try to abort. We'll control the whole operation." "Can you do that?" "I wrote the manual on signal hijacking," Sarah said. She pulled a small toolkit from her jacket and got to work. Her hands moved with precision, cutting wires, rerouting connections, attaching a small device the size of a thumb drive to the internal circuitry. It was delicate work. One wrong move and the failsafe would trigger. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Sweat dripped down Sarah's forehead. Her hands were steady, but her heart was racing. "Almost there," she murmured. She attached the final connection. The red light flickered. For a terrible moment, Sarah thought she'd triggered the failsafe. Then the light turned green. "Got it," Sarah said, exhaling. "We're in." Sullivan let out a breath he'd been holding. "Signal status?" Sarah checked the device. "Active and rerouted. They don't know we're listening. Let's get out of here before someone shows up." They exited the apartment quickly, locking the door behind them. They hurried down the stairs and back to the SUV. As they drove away, Sarah's tablet beeped. Data was flowing in, messages between the 12 operatives. She read them quickly. "They're going dark," she said. "No more communications until 0500 tomorrow. They're waiting for the final go signal." "Which you now control," Sullivan said. Sarah nodded. "Which I now control." Back at the operations center, the mood was tense but focused. Sarah uploaded the data from the relay node. The screens filled with message transcripts, location pings, activity logs. Admiral Harkness studied the information. "This is incredible, Commander. We have them completely mapped." "For now," Sarah said, "but we can't get comfortable. They're professionals. They'll be watching for anomalies." "What's the plan?" Torres asked. Sarah pulled up the map again. "At 0500 tomorrow, the operatives expect to receive a final confirmation code. That code will authorize them to execute Phase 2. If they don't receive it, they'll abort and disappear." "So we don't send the code," Commander Price said. "Wrong," Sarah said. "We send a modified code, one that delays their execution by 30 minutes. That gives our tactical teams time to move in and arrest all 12 simultaneously." "What if they realize the code is wrong?" Sullivan asked. "They won't," Sarah said. "I've analyzed their communication protocol. The code is algorithmically generated based on a timestamp. As long as the math checks out, they'll accept it." Harkness nodded slowly. "It's risky, but it's our best shot." "It's our only shot," Sarah said. The next 18 hours were a blur. Sarah worked nonstop, refining the plan, monitoring the operatives, coordinating with the field teams. She survived on coffee and adrenaline. At midnight, all 12 tactical teams were in position, eyes on every target, waiting. At 0400, Sarah began preparing the modified confirmation code. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, running simulations, checking the math. Captain Sullivan brought her a cup of coffee. "You should rest, even for an hour." "I'll rest when this is over," Sarah said without looking up. At 0458, Sarah's screen beeped. The relay node was active. It was waiting for the code. "All teams, stand by," Admiral Harkness said into his headset. Crimson 1 is transmitting. Sarah took a deep breath. She entered the modified code. Her finger hovered over the send button. Here we go, she whispered. She pressed send. The code transmitted. Sarah watched the screen. The relay node received it, processed it, accepted it. Code confirmed, Sarah said. They're buying it. Across the country, 12 operatives received the message on their encrypted devices. They checked the code. They verified the algorithm. Everything matched. They had their orders. Execute Phase 2 at 30 hours. All teams, Harkness said, you have the green light. Move in at 0529, 60 seconds before execution. Go. In New York, Philadelphia, and Boston, FBI agents burst into water treatment facilities. They found the operatives at their workstations, fingers on keyboards, seconds away from contaminating the water supply. They were taken down before they could react. In Washington, D.C. and Atlanta, Homeland Security teams stormed communication hubs. The operatives were cuffed and dragged out, their equipment seized. At 2 airports, a rail system, and a port authority, tactical teams move with precision. The targets never had a chance. In 3 financial data centers, cyber specialists shut down the systems, isolating the operatives' access. They were arrested at their desks, stunned and confused. In the operations center, Sarah watched it all unfold on the monitors. 12 screens, 12 simultaneous raids, 12 targets secured. All teams reporting success, Commander Price announced. All 12 targets in custody, no casualties, no escapes. The room erupted in cheers. Analysts hugged. Someone popped a bottle of champagne that had been hidden under a desk. Admiral Harkness walked over to Sarah. She was still sitting at her workstation, staring at the screens. You did it, Commander, Harkness said quietly. You saved millions of lives. Sarah didn't respond right away. She was watching the last screen, the one showing the relay node in Baltimore. It was still active, still transmitting. But now it was transmitting silence. It's not over, Sarah said. Harkness frowned. What do you mean? We got them all. We got the 12 operatives, Sarah said. But someone gave the orders. Someone planned this. Someone funded it. The people we arrested today are foot soldiers. The real enemy is still out there. Harkness's expression hardened. Then we find them. Sarah turned to face him. With respect, Admiral, that's not my job. I'm an analyst, not a hunter. I broke the code. I stopped the attack. But what comes next, that's for someone else. Harkness studied her. What are you saying, Commander? Sarah stood up. She was exhausted. Her body ached, but her mind was clear. I'm saying I did what you asked. I came back. I saved the country, again. But I'm not the same person I was 3 years ago. I can't just step back into my old life and pretend nothing happened. Then what do you want? Harkness asked. Sarah thought about it. She thought about the subway station, the cold nights, the invisibility. She thought about the precinct, the holding cell, the moment Admiral Harkness had said, Crimson 1. I want a choice, she said finally. 3 years ago, I didn't have one. I was used, blamed, and thrown away. This time, I want to decide what happens next. Harkness nodded slowly. All right, what's your decision? Sarah took a deep breath. I want to stay. I want my rank. I want my clearance. But I don't want to be buried in a basement analyzing code for the rest of my career. I want to train others. I want to build a team. I want to make sure what happened to me never happens to anyone else. Harkness smiled. Done. As of right now, you're the head of a new task force, cryptanalysis and counterintelligence. You'll report directly to me. You'll have full autonomy to recruit your team, set your priorities, run your operations. Sarah blinked. Just like that? Just like that, Harkness said. You've earned it, Commander, and frankly, we need you. You're the best we have. Sarah felt something unfamiliar. Hope. Thank you, sir, she said. Harkness extended his hand. Sarah shook it. No, Harkness said. Thank you. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood in front of a mirror in her new apartment. It was small but clean, government housing near the Naval Intelligence Headquarters. She wore her dress uniform, navy blue, perfectly pressed, ribbons on her chest, lieutenant commander insignia on her shoulders. She barely recognized herself. The gaunt, hollow-cheeked woman from the subway station was gone. In her place was someone who looked rested, healthy, strong. There was a knock on the door. Sarah opened it. Captain Sullivan stood in the hallway, also in dress uniform. "Ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be," Sarah said. They drove to the Pentagon. Sarah's new task force was being officially announced today. There would be press, cameras, questions. Sarah hated the attention, but Harkness had insisted. The country needed to know the threat had been stopped. They needed heroes. In the briefing room, Sarah stood beside Admiral Harkness as he addressed the assembled reporters. 3 weeks ago, Harkness said, this country faced a coordinated attack on our critical infrastructure. An attack that, if successful, would have crippled our nation and endangered millions of lives. That attack was stopped because of the dedication, skill, and courage of the men and women of our intelligence community. He gestured to Sarah. I want to recognize Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell, whose brilliant work in cryptanalysis was instrumental in identifying and neutralizing the threat. Commander Mitchell exemplifies the very best of our Navy and our nation. The room erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. Sarah stood at attention, her face neutral, but inside she felt a warmth she hadn't felt in years. After the briefing, Sarah stood outside the Pentagon, breathing in the cool autumn air. Captain Sullivan joined her. How does it feel? He asked. Surreal, Sarah admitted. A month ago, I was nobody. Now I'm standing in front of cameras, being called a hero. You were never nobody, Sullivan said. You were just invisible. There's a difference. Sarah smiled. I guess so. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Sullivan said, What's next for you, Commander? Sarah thought about it. She thought about the 12 operatives in custody, the enemy still out there, the work that remained. Next, Sarah said, I build something that lasts, a team, a system, a way to make sure people like me don't fall through the cracks. Sounds like a mission, Sullivan said. It is, Sarah agreed. As they walked back to the car, Sarah looked up at the sky. It was clear and blue, the kind of sky that felt infinite. For 3 years, she had been lost. She had been invisible. She had been forgotten. But she had found her way back, not to who she was, but to who she was meant to be. 6 months later, the new Counterintelligence Training Center opened in Bethesda, Maryland. It was a state-of-the-art facility dedicated to training analysts, cryptographers, and field operatives. The center's motto, inscribed above the entrance, read, No one left behind. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell stood in the main lecture hall, addressing the first class of recruits. 30 men and women, all handpicked, all brilliant, all ready to serve. You're here, Sarah said, because you have a gift. You can see patterns where others see noise. You can break codes that others think are unbreakable. You can save lives. She paused, looking at their faces. But I want you to remember something. This work is not just about codes and computers. It's about people. It's about protecting those who can't protect themselves. And it's about making sure that when someone falls, we pick them up. One of the recruits, a young woman named Ensign Parker, raised her hand. Commander, is it true you were homeless? The room fell silent. Sarah had expected this question. She had debated how to answer it. She decided on the truth. Yes, Sarah said. 3 years ago, I lost everything. My career, my home, my identity. I lived on the streets. I was invisible. And the system I had served forgot about me. The recruits listened, rapt. But I was found, Sarah continued. Not because I gave up, not because I waited for rescue, but because I never stopped being who I was. I never stopped seeing the patterns. I never stopped believing that I had value. She looked at each of them. You will face challenges. You will face betrayal. You will face moments when you want to give up. But I'm here to tell you, don't, because the work we do matters. The people we save matter, and you matter. The recruits nodded, their faces serious. Now, Sarah said, her voice shifting to business, let's get to work. We have codes to break and a country to protect. That evening, Sarah sat in her office, reviewing reports. There was a knock on the door. Admiral Harkness entered. Working late, Commander? He asked. Always, Sarah said with a small smile. Harkness sat down. I wanted to check in, see how you're settling in. I'm good, Sarah said. Better than good, actually. What we're building here, it feels right. Harkness nodded. You know, when we found you in that precinct, I wasn't sure you'd make it. You'd been through so much, but you surprised me. You didn't just survive, you thrived. Sarah set down her pen. Can I ask you something, sir? Anything. Why did you fight for me? 3 years ago, when everyone else gave up, why did you keep looking? Harkness was quiet for a moment. Then he said, because I've seen a lot of analysts in my career, thousands of them. But only a handful are truly exceptional. You were one of them. And I knew, even when everyone else doubted, that you were innocent. I couldn't let that stand. Thank you, Sarah said quietly. Harkness stood up. No, Commander, thank you. You reminded us all what service really means. After he left, Sarah sat alone in her office. She thought about the journey, the fall, the climb back. She thought about the subway station, the precinct, the moment everything changed. And she thought about the future. For the first time in 3 years, Sarah Mitchell wasn't just surviving. She was living. Epilogue. 1 year later, Sarah received a letter. It was addressed to Lieutenant Commander Sarah J. Mitchell, Counterintelligence Training Center, Bethesda, MD. The return address was a federal prison in Colorado. Sarah opened it carefully. Inside was a single handwritten page. Commander Mitchell, you don't know me, but I know you. My name is David Reese. I was one of the 12 operatives you stopped. I was the one in Philadelphia at the water treatment plant. I'm writing to you because I need to say something. What I did was wrong. I was recruited, trained, and sent to hurt innocent people. I believed I was fighting for a cause. I was wrong. When your team arrested me, I was angry. I thought I'd been betrayed. But in prison, I've had time to think. And I've realized something. You saved me. Not just from my mission, but from myself. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that your work mattered. You stopped me from doing something I could never undo. You gave me a chance to be better. I'll spend the rest of my life in here. But because of you, I'll spend it as a human being, not a monster. Thank you. David Reese. Sarah read the letter twice. Then she folded it carefully and placed it in her desk drawer. She didn't know if she would ever respond, but she knew one thing. The work mattered. Every code broken, every life saved, every person found. It all mattered. Sarah stood up, put on her jacket, and walked out of her office. She had a class to teach, a team to lead, and a mission to complete. She was no longer invisible. She was Crimson One. And she was exactly where she was meant to be. And that's where we'll end the story of Sarah Mitchell, the homeless woman who became a hero. A reminder that no matter how far you fall, no matter how invisible you feel, you always have value. You always matter. I hope this story gave you something to think about, maybe even inspired you a little. What was your favorite part? Drop a comment and let me know. And if you want more stories like this, hit that like button and subscribe. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.